Welcome to Safe on Deck. My name is Antonio Gemma More. In the fleet, I flew the MH-53 Sea Dragon helicopter, and these days I instruct the next generation of Naval Flight Officers in the T-6 Texan II. Throughout my incredibly short time in aviation, I've been fortunate to meet a wide cross-section of aviators, and along the way, I've done my best to document each and every flying memory. But eventually I came to realize that even the sharpest photo or the highest quality video can only really capture so much. Everyone I've met has a story to tell, and Safe on Deck is my humble attempt to capture as many of those exciting and inspiring aviation stories as possible. For episode 1, I had a chance to sit down with Lieutenant Tanner, callsign DODO, Matheny, in his hangar at the Ferguson Airport in Pensacola, Florida. DODO is a fully qualified EA-18G Growler electronic warfare officer and currently serves as an Instructor Naval Flight Officer at VT-86 Sabrehawks. We discussed a variety of topics, including DODO's path into naval aviation, his insights on operating the Growler, and his involvement in general aviation, including the EAA Young Eagles program. Thank you for taking the time to listen. In the future, I plan to continue to share similar interviews with both current and retired military aviators. If you have a question or a suggestion for a future interview, please leave it as a comment below. Safe on Deck, Episode 1, with Lieutenant Tanner DODO Matheny. Enjoy. Okay, Tanner, thanks again for sitting down to speak with me. I like to start all these by saying, tell me your origin story. I even hate using those for that phraseology, but where were you born? Where's your hometown?
So I was born in Las Vegas, but grew up in Arizona, kind of mix of Phoenix and Scottsdale.
Okay, so where do you consider home? I'm guessing Arizona.
Arizona, yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Tell me about Vegas. Is it all like the TV show? I used to watch that. I think it was like an NBC show back in the days. That captures your hometown entirely, I'm sure.
I think Pawn Stars, the show on History Channel, I think that encompasses Vegas.
Okay, awesome.
Somewhat accurately, just random people that just come through and have a bunch of random things and a bunch of different and unique stories. So it's an interesting town. My grandma still lives there, so I would occasionally go there and visit her. But yeah, everything as far as when I was born and raised, or not born and raised, but raised, was in Arizona. I moved there when I was 2, so everything happened in Arizona.
Where in Arizona specifically?
Phoenix, so northern Phoenix, and then my mom lives in Scottsdale. So my dad lived in northern Phoenix, up near Carefree Highway area, and then my mom lived up in northern Scottsdale off the 101 for people that know where that's at. But everything was just kind of in the northern part of the valley that they call it in Phoenix there.
What I know about Arizona is it's hot, it's beautiful, and there's a lot of aviation there. Why is that? Is it because of the climate, honestly?
Yeah, it's dry, so it's good on airplanes in terms of corrosion, and then also just 360 days of sunshine. It's very, very beautiful out there. You really only during the summer is when it gets super hot, and that's when the monsoons come. But other than that, that's like a 4-month period throughout the year. Everything else is calm winds and blue skies. It's beautiful, and that's probably why I got so involved with aviation, is because it's one of the best places in the country to do it.
Was that where you had your first flight in an airplane?
Yep. So first flight was down in Casa Grande, Arizona. I was actually in a T-6 Texan, the old World War II version, which was incredible. Went up when I was 13, and I was hooked. The instructor pilot that took me up, he recommended to start flying in gliders. So after that flight, I started doing gliders, and the first flight was incredible. It was aerobatics and sitting in the front and being able to fly the plane a little bit, which was really, really cool. Just
he had you in the front seat.
Yeah. So he was in the back, I was in the front, and I have a VHS recording of it. I guess back in 2007 or 2006 was when I went up for my first flight. And it was. I got a VHS recording of the cockpit, the right wingtip, and the tail. They had all these installed cameras, so I have the whole experience on film, which is great. So I get to relive it every once in a while.
That's wonderful. My first flight was in a Piper Comanche. Keith Moore was the pilot, 212 Golf Pop. I still remember the end number.
Nice.
And there's a photo of me, knee-high, white socks. And my mom was in the back seat taking photos of me up front. And I remember very little about it, but I remember the photos of it. So it's so cool that you have that, to kind of go back and relive with video.
Yeah,
so that's
absolutely.
Awesome. Okay, so after that, was it something that you were hooked? You knew it was going to be a lifelong passion, or just kind of another cool thing as you're growing up that you enjoyed?
I've never really experienced anything like it before, so it was one of those things where I was, as a kid, I was pretty reserved. I kind of stuck to myself because I didn't really know anybody else that enjoyed aviation or any of my other interests. I was big into space when I was younger. So I really enjoyed space. I don't know what flowed me into aviation. I think it was more so just the space shuttle maybe, and then just being in Arizona, seeing planes fly over all the time and going up for that first flight. Yeah, it was absolutely hooked at that point. And luckily I had good parents that were that would push me. Even on days I didn't want to fly, they would say, oh, let's go flying. And I'm glad they did, because it pushed me out of my comfort zone. And that's what's so great about aviation, is it pushes you out your comfort zone. You really truly see what you can do as a person. So yeah, it's one of those. That's why I got into aviation, because of the challenge and the thrill of it, and the freedom.
I know you mentioned gliders. I think we probably had a similar attraction to it, in that you can be a lot younger and fly gliders. Is that the reason why you?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So that instructor pilot that took me up in the T6, he recommended the gliders because you can solo at 14, you can get your license at 16, and I was 13. So within a month or two, I was flying in gliders out at Estrella Sailport in Maricopa, Arizona.
Okay.
Still there.
233s, right?
Yes. Schweitzer 233s, and I have some time in a Grobe 103, which is an aerobatic glider, awesome, and then a Super Blonic with Civil Air Patrol. I think we talked about that a little bit.
Absolutely, yeah.
Really, really interesting and unique glider, which, it was all a great experience.
You mentioned the space shuttle. That 233 is like the space shuttle. It's coming down whether you want to admit it or not.
Very true. Yep.
That's awesome. Was it a pretty? This is going to sound might sound a little silly. In East Tennessee, I got to do a little bit of ridge flying.
Nice.
In Rome, Georgia, and Civil Air Patrol, basically glider academies, you'd find a chicken coop and circle above it, because that's where the warm air was.
Yeah.
In Arizona, I guess everything's warm air, but where would you?
Yeah.
Was it a ridge that you could work, or was it?
It depended on the glider port. I flew out of two different glider ports. The one Estrella Sailport out at Maricopa. It was right on the southern end of a mountain range, so a lot of it was ridge and really just generic thermals. You'd look for dust devils, look for birds that were circling. And just jump in, look for the clouds, other indicators around the other, country. But Arizona was really good for gliders because of all that heat.
Okay, makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
After that, I know obviously you went to the U.S. Merchant Marine Academy. Big difference from Arizona. I'm guessing that was not. What made that decision for you? Why did you end up going in that direction out to New York?
It was kind of multiple factors. I met a gentleman through EAA actually that mentioned it and didn't really hear anything about it. And my goal was to go to the Air Force Academy and be an Air Force pilot and ultimately fly A-10s. That was my dream, because Davis Monthan there in Tucson, somewhat close by. And when I was in Civil Air Patrol, got to see some A-10s fly at the weapons range there and see them shoot the gun and all that. It was unbelievable. To say the least. So that was my dream. But Merchant Marine Academy, I heard about it, and it's like my parents taught me, they're like, don't always just go for one route, have a plan B and a plan C as well, because you don't want to get stuck if your one shot at something doesn't work out. So Merchant Marine Academy. So I applied to the Air Force Academy. I was offered the Falcon Scholarship, which I believe is like the preparatory school. So you would do that for a year and then go into the Air Force Academy, and then the Merchant Marine Academy offered just an appointment right away. So Merchant Marine Academy, you can go into any branch of service as an officer. So my intention was to go there and go into the Air Force and fly. So that was my main goal, even going into the Merchant Marine Academy, which is primarily boats and maritime, was to go active duty and fly for the military. Here I am in a Navy flight suit, but it's funny how things happen for a reason. And
that was going to be my next question. Why did you end up going Navy as opposed to Air Force out of the Merchant Marine Academy?
So every branch of service has a component there at the academy. So the Air Force guy there, I turned in the paperwork and all that, and it just didn't work out. I think he forgot to turn in the paperwork or something like that, something as silly as that. So that was kind of frustrating. But then the Navy department there was good about getting the paperwork together, and I applied for SNA, Student Naval Aviator, but I was offered the Student Naval Flight Officer position. And so I was kind of bummed out at first, but I realized, hey, I'm still going to be flying in airplanes. So I took that option. So went from wanting to be in the Air Force and flying to be a Navy Naval Flight Officer. So
I have a similar story for another time, but yes.
Okay,
that's awesome.
Cool.
So from there, and again, I'm going to butcher this, from the Merchant Marine Academy, where do you go next?
So there was about a 5-month gap between graduating and coming down here to Pensacola for flight school. So I actually went back home to Arizona, and I was temporary duty TDY at ASU there in Tempe for the 4.5 months. So I was there as just kind of like a stash ensign, just helping out local, just helping out with the cadets or the midshipmen there at the Naval ROTC unit. So yeah, I was just there for about 4 months and just, letting every day pass until I left for Pensacola.
Okay. And I want to kind of jump back and forth here a little bit. Obviously, certified Coast Guard life boatman. I want to make sure I say the terminology right. And then you have your third mate license as well.
Yeah.
What the heck is that like being on and I'm embarrassed to say, I think I maybe have 45 days of time on a boat in my naval career as an aviator. What is that experience like?
It was very, very unique. Would I trade the experience for anything? Absolutely not. I learned that I did not want to sail on ships as a career. It was just not my cup of tea. I like being off the ground versus on the ground or on the water. But it was really cool. I was on 3 different ships. I was kind of a unique case. I didn't leave the country. I was on 3 ships that stayed in the U.S. I was on U.S. flagged vessels, also known as like the Jones Act, which is a maritime act for U.S. ships can only go between U.S. ports. So from like Anchorage to Tacoma, for example, that was the first ship I was on. That is a U.S. flagged vessel. You can't have a foreign flagged vessel doing that. So I was on a ship going between Tacoma and Anchorage, and then the next ship I was on, it was the Jean Ann, which was a roll-on, roll-off, known as a ro-ro. It's just a giant car carrier that would carry vehicles, trucks, anything that can roll, essentially, between San Diego and Hawaii. So I went to 4 different islands in Hawaii, and then back to San Diego. It was just a big, just round trip there. And just did that for 4 months. And then I went on to the USNS Guadalupe, which is a military Sea Lift Command ship. That was oiler, so it carried diesel fuel, so marine diesel oil, I think was what it was called, and then like JP8, just jet fuel. So we would unrep anything from destroyers to aircraft carriers, anything that needed some sort of fuel, whether it was for the ship or for supporting assets. Yeah, we did that. So that was also in San Diego. So I literally just went right across from the Coronado Bridge to NAS North Island there, where the port was, and got on the Guadalupe, and I was on that for 4 months as well. So that was really fun. So yeah, it was the Alaska ship first, then the Guadalupe, then the Jean Ann. I got the ships mixed up, but yeah, it was really, really awesome.
A little bit of everything, it sounds like.
Yeah, I got to see kind of different aspects of everything. So it was really cool, and I still keep in touch with people that I sailed with, because they're a unique breed of folks, and it was definitely a great experience. Even though I didn't want to do it as a career, it was definitely still great to try it out. And
what is that licensure program like? Is it a PQS, basically, hey, you're going to have a checklist, you're going to do these things. Once you've done these things, is there maybe an oral test, a practical test? And I'm just guessing based on aviation, is it a similar kind of flow?
For the Coast Guard license?
Absolutely, yep.
Yeah. So in order to get your Coast Guard license, you have to sail for 365 days. So that was incorporated into the curriculum at the Merchant Marine Academy, was sailing on all those ships. But yeah, it's a very, very extensive process to get your license. It's way more so than getting an aviation rating.
It sounds like
it was quite the process. So yeah, you sail for 365 days. During your sailing, you would do these things called sea projects, where you would just do all this stuff, just massive stuff. Like we still do celestial navigation, so we had to do celestial navigation while we were out there, and then we had to do like ship drawings of systems for the engineering part. Even though I was a deck officer, we worked on the engineering aspect of stuff as well, so that way we had the full grasp of how the ship operated. And then back at school, we would do all these study sessions for the license exams. The license exams are over the course of 1 week, and every day was a different test. So one day would be like navigation, the next day would be like maritime law. It was just all these different aspects that was very interesting. So we had our curriculum incorporated study sessions, practice tests, and then the Coast Guard would come in and evaluate us. So every day it was called License Week, and that's a big deal because you're a senior. That's the last thing you do before you graduate. Final exams are over with, and now you're solely focusing on these license exams. So so you got to do all those, and I think like the minimum is like an 80% on all the tests. It depends on the test, but I think the average was around 80%. And then the last day on Friday, that's when you take the tests, and now the waiting game begins. You're waiting around for a couple hours for them to tally up all the scores, and then they'll let you know when they post them. You go see, and pending you pass all your tests, which if you don't, you just stay behind and retake whatever you need to retake. But then you have a couple weeks off between license exams and graduation. So so it was definitely a relief to have that done. Even though I didn't use the license at all, it's still nice to have. I put in what's called a certificate in continuity with the Coast Guard. So it's just like having my license on hold, so it doesn't really expire. So if I do want to use it, I just have to go take some tests to reactivate it, and then I'll be good to go.
Okay. Well, there you go. Backup career.
Yeah. The money's not bad. It really isn't. It's just, you're gone 6 months out of the year. And
that's my very limited understanding of mariners, is exactly what you said. It's really great money. It's a pretty challenging lifestyle at times.
It is. Yeah.
Okay. Well, speaking of that transition, so now you show up in Pensacola, and what was that like showing up day one of, you obviously, I'm guessing you were a validator. You didn't have to do, what was it? Used to be called IFS, Introductory Flight Screening. Now it's all kind of combined together into NIFE, Naval Introductory Flight Evaluation. I'll try to get the acronyms right.
I think that's right.
But I'm guessing you validated, you showed up with a pilot's license?
Yes.
Okay, cool. So roll right into API, Aviation Pre-Flight Indoctrination. Again, back with the acronyms. For someone that had a bit of exposure into aviation already, what was that like? Was it a good experience? Was it kind of a welcome to the Naval Aviation experience? How do you remember it?
It was welcome to aviation experience, or the Naval Aviation experience. So it was, with my limited civilian time of flying, the military aspect of stuff was a whole different ball game. So I just kind of showed up and tried to be a sponge and absorb whatever I could. API was interesting. It was an interesting experience, and it was challenging as well, but it was good. I was motivated to be there and wanted to just keep my head down to work as hard as I could. So it was good.
Cool. So after API, you show up to VT10. So that's, let me be very clear, primary flight instruction in the T6. So first couple flights in the front seat. After that, obviously you have an instrument navigation syllabus, ONAV. So using ground features, formation syllabus, a little bit more to it than that. What was that like? Did you enjoy flying the T6?
It was fantastic. The first 5 flights in the front seat were incredible. The on-wings there, my on-wing was actually a fighter guy, which was pretty unique at VT10. And he let me do as much as I wanted, which was good. I told him I had prior flight experience, so he just said, "Okay, do what you want. If I get uncomfortable, I'll take the controls." So so we would taxi out of the apron there, and I would taxi the plane and take it off, take it to the area, do the air work, come back, and so it was fantastic. I still miss the airplane. It was an awesome airplane, and you actively flying in it, you can relate. It's a really cool airplane, and I definitely don't regret my time at VT10. That's where I learned a lot of my basic aviation knowledge that I use now, like instrument stuff and low-level navigation, all that. And that's where I learned it all, was in VT10.
Absolutely. And I think the thing you hit on, I don't know if folks necessarily will pick up on that if they don't really have an appreciation for naval aviation or maybe military aviation in general. What you described, hey, this is what I love, this is what I enjoy. Can I do it? You come with the knowledge, you come with the preparation, and I'll be honest, from an instructor perspective, if the student has that attitude, yes, absolutely, I have things I have to, check the box, and I have to instruct you in certain spots, but so to speak. But if you bring that attitude, man, it's going to be a good day.
Yeah.
As opposed to the other side of it, if I'm kind of on the front or back seat going, come on, man, do something.
Right.
I want that assertive. I want that, I don't know if aggressive is the right word. I think actually kind of it is the right word.
Yeah.
Be in charge of your destiny. Be that mission commander. Own that mindset as soon as possible.
Right.
Someone taught me that recently, and I love it. I'm telling everyone else, be the mission commander. Have that mindset from day one, flight one.
Yeah, yeah. Having the enthusiasm and that proactiveness is huge, because you'll see it within the first 5 minutes of the flight. If this kid is want to be here and wants to work hard, and then there's others that you kind of have to drag along a little bit
in the brief. Not even in the flight. In my humble experience, absolutely.
Yeah.
Because I did ask one of my old on-wings, hey, when At what point can you tell if this is going to go well or poorly? And just to be clear, it can go very poorly at the last seconds of the flight, or frankly, taxiing back in. The whole flight is, we're evaluating the entire time. However, that first impression, even the night before, a student might text me, "Hey, sir, ma'am," well, not ma'am for me, but "Hey, sir, where do you want to go for this cross-country flight or this out and in instrument flight?" That assertiveness, "Hey, this is the plan I've got. This is what I want to go with. Hey, actually, we'll do this for training objectives maybe a little differently, but I like you have a plan. I like you have the drive." You can sense it from the very, very beginning. So,
okay.
I'm sure you probably see the same thing.
Yeah.
Actually, probably on your side of ET-86, I'm guessing that's hopefully already kind of baked into the cake a little bit, but we'll talk about that in a second.
It is, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, cool. So speaking of which, after VT-10, you got a couple options. Can you kind of talk through where student NFOs, obviously you haven't got your wings yet, but where can you go, and then where did you go?
So you can go to 2 squadrons, VT-86, which is the advanced squadron for pointy nose guys. So that's for Super Hornets and Growlers. And then if you want to do the maritime aspect / E2D, E2C stuff, you will go to VT4, which is is the advanced squadron for those guys, which is mainly simulator-based training and scenario-based training. So I wanted to go jets from day one, so I was fortunate enough to get selected for 86.
Was it a large crowd of you that all selected at the same time? I know sometimes it's bigger classes, smaller classes. Do you happen to remember?
I think my class, it was around 10 or so.
Okay.
The folks that I went through VT-10 with, that went 86 with me, they stayed with me the whole way, which was cool. So we all kind of just went through primary and advanced flight training together.
Okay. And did you already have a fleet aircraft in mind when you wanted to go to 86?
I think I was a little bit more open-minded when I showed up, but as it progressed through and I was exposed to both the VFA and the VAQ guys, and just hearing about the different missions, I elected to want to go Growlers. And I think I had that pretty early on within a month or two of being at 86. I knew I wanted Growlers.
VT-10, those very basic looks at all those broad topics that I talked about in a T6. Now you're doing that in a significantly faster, more advanced aircraft, the T-45 Goshawk. Broadly speaking, am I?
No, that's
okay.
Yeah, that's really accurate. Yeah. So,
but obviously, again, moving faster, and then now, tactics, the admin side of it, that's what you're trying to nail down, so you get those students ready to go to the FRS, the fleet.
Yep, absolutely.
Okay.
Yep. Our job is to not produce a mission-capable tactical aircrew like ready to go lead a section of Super Hornets or Growlers into a fight. It's mainly to make sure that they can manage a section safely and effectively, and the mission stuff they can work on at a later time.
Okay.
Yeah, we do introduce them to mission sets, but that's stuff that we don't necessarily fail kids for. It's mainly safety of flight and admin, going to and from a working area, managing your wingman, stuff like that. That's the stuff we want to make as perfect as possible at 86. So when they go to the fleet, they just don't look like somebody. Yeah, they're just not, being a bag of sand back there. They're actually an effective part of the team.
I say potato or hanging on by the static wicks.
There you go.
But yes,
yep.
I'm with you 100% there.
Yep.
Okay, well, IP to IP here. Tell me, what can I do better? What the folks that we're sending from VT-10 over to you guys at VT-86, and it doesn't have to be specifics, but maybe broad trends. What are things that you're looking for in that? Maybe it's a mindset, technical knowledge, attitude. What is it that you find makes a great SNFO? And then obviously you're going to get your wings when you leave 86. What are those traits that you found are valuable? And then what are things that, hey, maybe it's maybe something that people might think from a movie or bad gouge or other stuff, that maybe leave that in the back of your mind. Don't open your mouth and say those things in the briefing spaces with us at 86.
Yeah, no worries. So I think the biggest piece is we want to make sure those kids, we're not forced to go 86. I know that can happen from one time to another, but the kids that I've seen so far with my limited time at 86 have been motivated and positive, and they want to learn. They want to make mistakes so you can correct them and make them better for the next event, which is always really great to see. I know over at VT-10 you guys have more of a plethora of different students, and you guys are getting them from ground zero, from day zero. You're building them up and taking them to get somewhat competent into an airplane, and we expect them to be at a certain level in terms of like basic admin, like going to and from an area, radio work. We expect that to be good, not excellent, but good. And the biggest thing that VT-10 can do for us is just make sure you hone as much of that admin piece as possible, so that way when they come to 86, they aren't acting like this is their first time in an airplane. I know that can be trying at times, but
Absolutely.
yeah, that's the biggest thing is we just want you guys to keep them at a high standard and hold them to it.
Absolutely. And we want to all rise to that standard together. We don't want to bring the standard down. One of the great frustrations that occasionally I've seen, and let me be clear, not at VT10, just broadly speaking, I would say just aviation in general. So I'm speaking to civilian and maybe a little bit military, but I want to rise up to that standard. I want to rise up and meet it. I don't want it to come down to meet me. There are some folks that I think maybe we all want to succeed. We all want people to be successful. But more than any of that, I want people to be safe. And some of this stuff is not a joke. I'll be honest, some of the topics I get the most passionate about, to me, are because I've either lost friends or had folks that have had very close calls, or I personally have had a close call. Mm-hmm. And then so in my mind, that charges me with, okay, I need to share that experience with others in a professional manner, so that way they learn, they never make that mistake again that I made or almost made or a friend almost made. Mm-hmm. So I guess what I'm saying is when folks get salty and passionate, I always hope that, or when I get salty and passionate about maybe describing something, I hope people realize it's meaningful and there's a reason why. There's a story there, and usually I'm more than happy to tell it.
Right.
But I don't know if that's always necessarily appreciated by people in the moment. And I look back to some of my instructors. I had an instructor going through VT6, my safer solo check ride in the T6, and I promise I'll keep this short.
That's
fine. Great guy, he's a Marine, Harrier pilot, very tough reputation as a briefer. And for whatever reason that day, it was a Monday. I remember on Sunday he sent me a text message, "Hey man, I have a cold. We're not gonna fly, but we're still gonna brief." And I was like, "Oh yeah, I'm ready for it." And I had been given the gouge. He was very particular about knowing all your survival gear, everything on the vest, to the point that put the vest on, close your eyes, and I want you to point what's in what compartment.
Oh wow, okay.
And I remember thinking, yeah, that could save my life. Sounds great. Check. Let's do it. Mm-hmm. And so I did. I actually went in the parallel off, put the gear on, went through all of it, and not just for him, but for myself. And so we start the brief. Obviously I could tell he was feeling under the weather. And he started asking a couple things, and I just started going, just describing every little bit of detail I know. And I remember he put his hand up. He said, "Stop. Someone gave you the gouge." And I said, "Yes, sir." He goes, "Okay, cool. You're a good man. Like, no worries." He said, "Do you know why?" And I did not know why. I just knew he was very particular about survival gear. And unfortunately, he had an experience actually in the training command where some folks that were very close to him were lost, and the survival gear played a part in that story.
Okay.
And so I remember that light switch moment of, yeah, this stuff matters. I knew it mattered instinctively, but sometimes hearing those stories and having that personal connection, he cared, and he cared about me. He cared about the people that would fly in the aircraft with me, and I got that, and I try to keep that passion as well. So
that's great.
I hope that's something that you've seen as well. But this stuff matters. It's serious. It's not a joke.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Speaking of serious stuff that's not a joke, obviously, and I'm kind of jumping ahead here, you're an instructor at 86 now, so you get to see it from the other side of the curtain. You were a student, now you're an instructor. What are maybe some, I don't want to say debrief points, but what are things looking back on your time at 86 as a student? Would you have done differently, maybe spent more time on, less time on? What do you think, if you can kind of debrief your own performance? I think about my own performance all the time. What would you have done differently, if anything at all?
So we, as military aviators, we always strive for perfection. We may not make it, however, the idea and having that passion, that proactiveness to work hard and be as perfect as you can is very important in any airframe. Particularly with the pointy nose stuff, I can just relate because of the speed and the reaction time needs to be quicker on things. So we expect kids to, you're here as a student. We expect you to study extensively. Even on weekends, we expect you to study. That goes without saying. Take a breather, enjoy yourself. When I was a student, the Blue Angel boss at the time, Boss Frosch, I actually had to sit down with him. I was lucky enough to go out and have a dinner with him with a friend. His dad was flying for Delta, and the boss, he was looking at flying for Delta. So he knew we were both flight students, him being a student naval aviator and then me being a student NFO. I remember him telling me his routine that he did was Monday through Friday, or technically Monday through Thursday, you study as much as you can. You study, from sunrise to sunset. Friday after work, go enjoy yourself, have a good time. Just leave everything at home, leave work at home, and go decompress, go relax, or go have fun, whatever you want to do. Saturday, just take it easy. Don't go as hard as you did Friday, maybe. And then Sunday, start studying again. And I really took that to heart because he is a very accomplished aviator, and hearing somebody give that advice, and he was very passionate about it. You could tell his body language, his mannerisms were all very passionate. So it's one of those things where I really took it to heart. And that was my process that I did, that I utilized going through VT10 and VT86, and it worked well for me. So I try to instill that on kids is, make sure before you show up to the brief, there's almost nothing that the instructor can say to stump you on something like basic, what are we working on today? What are the MIF items? What are our skill sets that we're working on today? You have a syllabus and you know what you're going to be evaluated on for that sortie or for that event. So come to the brief knowing as much as you can about each item. And I mean, that's what I did. And that's what I tried to, impress onto these kids, is to make sure that they study as much as they can, because the more they know now, the better they'll do later on. They'll have a good foundation of all this basic information that we're passing to them, all the basic tactics, admin, tac admin. We want that to be solid. So, long story short, I try to tell these kids to work hard. This isn't a job at Publix where you're just bagging groceries from 9 to 5. This is real. This is serious, and you're getting paid to do it. So I mean, that's pretty great. You get to fly around in multi-million-dollar aircraft and get paid to do it. So embrace your time here and study hard and work hard and be the best that you can be. So.
Absolutely. People's lives will literally, not figuratively, literally depend on you knowing what you need to do.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, we talked about, I think I might have mentioned it earlier, debriefing things, but let's say you've made a mistake, and this might be as a student, as an actual winged aviator, etc. What's that, I have an idea in the back of my mind, so I'm kind of curious to hear what you think. But let's say a student made a mistake on a flight. Mm-hmm. Taking ownership of it, being able to debrief yourself, being able to debrief others, what is it you're looking for in students? Is that a skill set you're cultivating as an IP at 86, or is that more of a fleet thing, or what was your... what are your thoughts on that? So
it's not like an official thing that we grade on, but we do push that to the students. We want them to be an open book and be ready to take some punches. You have to have thick skin in this community, because nobody's perfect. Everybody's going to make a mistake. We're humans. I mean, we're not, we make mistakes. It's our nature. It happens. We have our good days and we have our bad days. The biggest thing is we always do stuff called true confessions. I'm sure you did that in the fleet as well, where at any point you can just stand up and say, hey, I did this the other day. It wasn't the right thing to do. I messed up, and I know what I need to do, and we'll take that forward. And we just did that a couple weeks ago in 86, where guys just, they might not do a check complete or completely correct, and then they take off and realize, oh yeah, I forgot a step or something like that. Things happen. So that's where, you come back, you live to fly another day, and you impress that onto both instructors and students, because I mean, it's good because we do this stuff with the students there. These instructors will get up and admit that they made a mistake here or made a mistake there. So it's a humbling experience for everybody, and it shows to the students that, hey, although the instructors, they know more than you, it doesn't mean that they're immune to mistakes. So we try to set the standard to show them, hey, it's okay that you make mistakes. That's what you're here for. You're a student. And we want to make sure that we get those big mistakes taken care of. And the biggest thing is we want the students to come to the debrief, and when an instructor says, hey, you could have done this better, they go, oh, okay, very good. And they're writing stuff down. That's a big thing too, is they're writing stuff down. And we don't want to see an attitude. We don't want to see them try to make up a reason why they did it that way, or they're just making an excuse. Occasionally you get students that have bad attitudes like that. And that stuff needs to be nipped in the bud right away, because they're not going to survive in the community if they act like that. So
I agree wholeheartedly. Yeah.
We're all a team. We all want to make sure everybody flies, relatively the same way, and everybody is safe. So we try to impress on these students, hey, just have an open mind, be ready for criticism, and try not to make the same mistake twice.
Absolutely.
So.
And that's something that and maybe speaking to like a broader societal thing, I wish that we could take ownership for mistakes. Yep, mm-hmm. I made that mistake. I'm sorry, won't do it again. Obviously didn't mean to do it. It's a mistake.
Right.
An accident is an accident. A mistake is a mistake. And I'm going to learn from it. And like you said, share that, the true confessions. I think that's maybe a bit of a Navy term, but absolutely some of the greatest learning comes from that, because I've had folks that I remember in my fleet squadron looking up to this guy's never made a mistake, or this girl has never done anything wrong. They are so squared away. They are so, I don't want to use the word perfect, but they got it going on.
Right.
And then they would own up to something, and I would think, holy crap,
Yeah.
Number one, I appreciate that. I respect it, and I realize that, well, if they can do it, I can do it too. And then that feedback loop continues, and hopefully it's shared with others. But it's also not on YouTube, or it's not clickbaity, you know what I mean? It's not for likes and shares, and
Yep.
It's coming from, I don't want to say a place of love, coming from a place of safety. We want to do the right thing, so we share it with others, and we don't make that mistake again.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
that's awesome. Okay, cool. So one last thing while we're still here at VET-86 and as your student, you flew a little bit of general aviation then, right?
Yeah. So I was at the airport we're at right now doing the little chat here. This is where I did some of my general aviation flying out here. This is where I got my tail wheel endorsement. This is where I took up my, at the time, girlfriend up for her very first flight. Was in the Cub out here, and this place is, I tried to fly as much as I could on weekends. That's what I try to tell kids too, is that this isn't a job for me, it's a hobby. Like, I'm getting paid to fly around in airplanes. Like, it's pretty great.
Absolutely.
It's you don't hear that a lot. If people, if you enjoy what you do for work, you never have to work a day in your life. I guess for a job, you wouldn't have to work a day in your life. But just being able to fly out here and just keep my hours up and keep current to be able to take people up, and flying the Cub was an awesome airplane. It's really fun to fly, and it's a tail dragger, so it adds that little extra challenge. And
yes.
So between studying and doing stuff at VT-10, VT-86, I tried to fly as much as I could on weekends.
That was, as I recall, so at the Ferguson Airport, I know the Brown family, they used to have the flight school. I think it was Wrong Brothers.
Yep.
That was an awesome name for a flight school.
Yeah.
It was 2 Legend Cubs, right? So when we're saying a Cub, it's not like a 1940-something Piper Cub. This was about as nice of a Cub, big air quotes there, as you could imagine.
Yep. The 156 Whiskey Bravo, that one crashed, so luckily everybody survived. But all that's left of it is a piece of the fabric in the office that shows the tail number. 155 Whiskey Bravo is still in the hangar over there. Since the flight school's closed down, they don't rent it out to anybody. But it's sitting there in the hangar. It's airworthy and ready to fly. It's still there. And yes, the Brown family, they still own the airfield here. They have their massive helicopter operation, and they fly out of here. So it's a great airport. It's in a great location, and there's good people out here that enjoy aviation. So
absolutely,
it's great.
Yeah, it's good to be surrounded by folks. I remember. I love kitschy sayings. I think my mom told me this one, but you always want to be surrounded by people that are smarter than you. And number one, for me, that's not a high bar to crawl over. But number two, especially being out here at Ferguson, there's some really incredible folks that have airplanes tucked away in these hangars, and it's wonderful to get to meet them and be around them. And you become better as an aviator just being in their presence.
Right.
So.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so out of 86, obviously earned your wings. Was that in the museum, the Naval Museum? Museum of Naval Aviation?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. That was March. I think it was March 31st, 2017.
Okay.
Yep.
And then from there, do you already know where you're going? Hornet, Growler, East Coast, West Coast? You already kind of have an idea?
When you get what's called soft winging, which is when you do your last flight and your instructor rips off your student name tag and puts on your name tag with wings. Shortly thereafter, you do a selection. So you'll go into our little recreation area up in VT-86 called Wings, and that's where the skipper and XO will come in and have you all like in alphabetical order or something like that on his list, because he wants to make sure he gives people the right patches, because that would be really awkward. That
probably never happens.
I have not seen it yet, knock on wood. But I would hate to see that, because I'd feel bad for a kid, especially if what he wrongfully received was his number one choice.
Yeah, exactly.
So they'll come in and rip off your 86 squadron patch and slap on whatever rag that you're going to. And so that was exciting. I was fortunate to get growlers, and my wife was there, so that was cool, because we were also usually we do the selections and a call sign review board at the same time. So we give the students like a funny call sign, so they go through like a arbitrary CRB call sign review board.
Okay.
The call sign doesn't stick unless it's like really, really good, but usually they're just kind of funny, like a story that happened on dead or something. So they get that call sign, but then they'll get it. You don't use it outside of 86. Like, you go onto the rag and that's it. Like, your first name, last name again.
Sure.
But yeah, so you get your selection, then you do your call sign review board, and then usually it depends on when they do it, but usually it's like a week or so within when you actually wing your formal ceremony at the museum.
Okay. Awesome. So you knew you were going out to the West Coast, out to Washington State.
Yep.
Tell us about the Growler. What is the EA-18G?
It's an awesome airplane.
That's a good start.
Yep. It's an electronic attack variant of the F-18 Super Hornet. Essentially a 2-seat Super Hornet, the F model. It just becomes the EA-18G. So on the outside, there are definitely some differences on the airframe that you can look at, but to an uneducated person, they would see them side by side and not know the difference. But yeah, instantly, if you knew the key differences, you would recognize if it's a Growler or not. But yeah,
no gun, obviously.
No gun.
If you look for the port up in the nose,
exactly.
That's one way to
there's a blanking. Yep, there's a blanking plate there. The wingtips on the Growler, they are hard mounted receiver wingtips. They look like giant cylinders on the wingtips with little fins on them.
And you'd normally you'd have an AIM-9. I think it's the only weapon that can go on that station, right? So no air-to-air missiles on the wingtips. You've got the receiver instead.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yep. So there's that and the blanking plate for the gun. And other than that, pending neither aircraft has ordnance on it or pods or anything, they are nearly identical.
Okay.
So really the biggest thing from afar is looking at the wingtips. You can tell if it's a Growler or not.
What's the primary mission for the aircraft?
It's electronic attack. So our primary job is to go out. We can either search for the surface-to-air missile systems or just like early warning radar systems, anything that emits radiation to locate aircraft. Our job is to go out there and, if needed, locate it. If there are other assets out there that can pass that information, we can then see where they're seeing it. And our job with our ALQ-99 pods is to jam those radar systems and be able to degrade them enough so that way, if we have friendly aircraft coming in with actual ordnance to drop to destroy either that target or destroy a target that's nearby, it allows us to degrade those radar systems so they are not tracked or targeted by surface-to-air missile systems or even like other enemy aircraft. We're degrading those radar systems so those enemy aircraft can't get cueing from those guys. So our job is to make the enemy really angry, not necessarily kill them, but our job is to make them very angry so they can't try to take out our own guys.
Like a thief in the night, you're trying to get their vision and their what they can see, what they can hear, and so I don't want to say the mugger, but whoever's coming in next can really take them out. Awesome. That sounds incredibly complex, and the reason I mentioned that, I have a couple friends that were so the airplane that the Growler followed up, the Prowler, EA-6B, EA-6B, let me be clear, not the E-6B, the EA-6B. As I understand it, obviously, ironically, same pods, so the transmitter, the way that you're jamming is the same pod between that airframe and your airframe.
Yes.
But I'm also guessing it was probably a little bit less automated, and I know nothing about it, so this is a total swing here.
That's fine.
3 folks in that jet doing the mission. Now you're the one in the backseat of the Growler doing the mission. Can you speak maybe historically how that mission has changed over time? Is it more automation that's just come naturally as things have gotten a little different in that battle space?
Yeah, so where the gun would be in the Growler, it is where the system called the EAU, the Electronic Attack Unit, is located. And this is it's a really fancy system that is able to do a lot of the work for us, which is great. So yeah, like you said in the Prowler, 3 ECMOs, that was their name, were ECMOs, Electronic Countermeasure Officers, that would all have specific tasks on locating systems or jamming those systems or relaying that information to external assets. Yeah, so it was a lot of people to do what now one person does in the Growler. So yeah, a lot more automation. But yes, like you said, still using the legacy ALQ-99 pod. It's the same exact pod that were on the Prowlers. We're now using them on the Growlers. So that's really, sometimes those they are old, so they do tend to not work at times. Well, most of the time, I should say. But they are very effective when they are working.
Absolutely.
And so a lot more automation in the Growler. It's able to detect stuff and give us what it sees rather than us trying to figure it out. However, I do say that with a grain of salt. There are a lot of times when the system doesn't know what it's seeing, so you have to go in and manually determine what it is, which happens all the time. But however, though, we normally have another aircraft with us that we can work with, so they can help kind of take some of the load if it's a very dynamic and highly loaded environment in terms of enemy assets that we're seeing. they can help shed the load a little bit and allow us to work on what we need to work on. But yes, the system is pretty intuitive. We have our 2 hand controllers in the back cockpit, kind of like just a real upgraded version of like an Xbox or PlayStation controller, where we can do a lot of the stuff just with the buttons on the hand controllers. And we're able to locate stuff, we can jam it, and we can do all that in under a minute. The system's pretty impressive, and it can neck all that stuff down in terms of accuracy rather quickly. So it's a great airplane, and it does a lot of things well, and you're kind of just a monitor back there at times. Sometimes it can do everything on its own.
Okay, makes sense.
Yeah.
Big step up from, well, we talked about that Legend Cub, or that tailwheel airplane, to the T6, to the
Yeah.
T-45. What is it like in the back of the Growler? What was that first flight like? I'm guessing it was probably pretty memorable.
It was fantastic, yeah. Went up with actually an Australian Air Force pilot, Royal Australian Air Force pilot, call sign Verge, super awesome guy. And yeah, I remember the first time getting in it, it was something where I just referring to my sim training. For me, it's like the first time I get into an airplane, it's not that time to just look around and go, oh, wow, this is so cool. It's like, okay, I have my procedures. I need to make sure I do all this correctly. So I get in the cockpit, I strap in, I turn on the systems that I need to turn on, and we start taxiing out. And then the first time I really got to see how awesome this airplane was on the takeoff, when ran up to 100% power, and then we went into afterburner, and that's when I really felt the push, the acceleration into the seat. And which is kind of unique, or not unique, but different from the T6 and the T45. You have something called Vox, which is voice activated intercom. So you can adjust the sensitivity. So when you talk, the mic will pick up you're talking, so you don't need to key up an intercom switch or anything. So that's super nice. It keeps your hand free for working a hand controller, writing stuff down. But yeah, so luckily I had that turned down, because when we hit the afterburner, I started laughing because it was just such an awesome acceleration that I've never felt before. So yeah, on the takeoff, I was laughing, then got up into the air and got to the working area, and we just did some basic maneuvers. He kind of showed me what the airplane can do at slow speed, which is very, very impressive. So yeah, it was an incredible flight landing and debriefing, and yeah, just going on to the next flight. And yeah, it was. I still miss it. It was an awesome airplane. Definitely took it for granted at times, as I guess a lot of people do. You know, it becomes a routine, and you just get used to it. But yeah, you know, I made it I tried to remember every time after I get out of the jet, you know, we do the post-flight walk around and just give a pat on the nose, you know, just like, thanks for a good day.
Absolutely.
So, yeah, awesome airplane.
I kind of that feeling in the 53 every time on a hot seat. So we start the helicopter up at the beginning of the day, and it will fly all day long. You just hot seat and cruise.
Wow.
And I think y'all can do that in the jet as well,
Yep.
right? On the flight deck, just shut an engine down.
Yep.
Okay, but yeah, kind of a similar thing. 79-foot rotor arc, and you'd get to the edge of the rotor arc, daytime, nighttime, dusk, and you're waiting on the other crew to basically pull into the spot, you know, chocks and chains, or really just chocks, usually on the flight line in Norfolk. So you're waiting on them to kind of marshal you in, and just sit there and kind of look up and realize, my God, this is a huge aircraft. This is so fortunate to get to do this in the civilian world. There's a lot of cool civilian aviation, don't get me wrong, but not the same, not even close to the same. So very, very fortunate, very privileged that was something that get to share with others, hopefully with photos or video, or honestly just great stories. So
Yep.
Okay, so that's first flight in the back of the Growler. What was the syllabus like at the FRS, the Fleet Replenishment Squadron? Is it a lot of tactics? Is it a lot of sims? What's the main focus for you going through?
It's kind of a mixture of a bunch. So yeah, you show up, and it's very similar to the VT syllabus in terms of them getting you NATOPS qualified. So yeah, you start with a bunch of ground school with systems familiarization, and then you go through your sims, you go through your EP, your emergency procedure sims. And so that way, by the time you get to the jet for your first flight, you are well versed on the aircraft systems and emergency procedures. So you know how to handle any situations if they do arise. But yeah, so you start with the FAM phase, and then you move into air-to-air phase, where you do the air-to-air stuff, which is actually very similar to the way we do it in 86, which is great. So the student NFOs in 86 actually get a taste of what air-to-air stuff is like, which is great, because the processes are very similar to how they are in the Growler, at least. And so the NFOs are helping out the student pilots at this point, or the FRS, the fleet replacement pilots, or replacement pilots. So yeah, we're helping them out with the air-to-air stuff, because we've actually worked with the radar, and the pilots haven't. So So we do the air-to-air phase, and then that's when we move into the electronic attack phase. We also do BFM and stuff like that too. So you kind of get a smorgasbord of everything that the aircraft can do while you're in the FRS. And it depends on your training and all that. It depends on the flow and how fast they can get you in on stuff. So usually it's like the FAM, and then you go into AWI, all-weather intercept, BFM, and then your electronic attack. And everybody knows the electronic attack phase is the biggest phase because that's our primary mission. So that's where we really buckle down and make sure that we know the stuff as well as we can. And depending on how long it takes, it can take from 8 months to a year and 2 months.
Okay.
So, it can vary.
So one of the things I try to impress upon students at VT10, I honestly at times think your job is incredibly challenging because me as the stick monkey up front, I can put my hands on the flight controls and make the thing do the thing. Mm-hmm. Talking someone onto that has to be so challenging because you may not be looking at the exact same things they are. Your head might not be put in the same direction. In many ways, believe it or not, by not having your hands on the flight controls at times, and I know you know this as a pilot, you have better situational awareness because you're not just losing a couple of that, 20, 30% of brainstem power just flying the airplane.
Yep.
For the BFM side specifically, what is it like learning to talk someone's head, so to speak, into the fight and, kind of engaging them, because you have to learn it yourself, and then you have to learn how to be, it's not just telling the pilot to do pilot shit, so to speak, from a great movie. Yeah. It's a lot more than that. What is that exposure and experience like? So
that comes with just being more proficient and experience it more. So like as a student in 86, you really don't know what to say, so you're kind of just along for the ride, and the pilots know where the plane needs to be, so they'll put it where it needs to be. As you get into the fleet, and you're now flying with student pilots, and now here you have more experience in the BFM arena than these pilots do. It's important that you learn how to be directive over descriptive. So what I mean by that is, if they lose sight of the bandit or of the guy that you're going up against, it'd be like, oh, I don't see him. Instead of saying, oh yeah, he's 3 o'clock, he's about 10 degrees high. It's instead, if you guys are in the fight and he loses sight, you say, roll right, stop roll. He's on our lift vector, which is like directly above us, wherever the top of the aircraft is pointed. That's the easiest way to describe it, is our lift vector. So if he loses sight and your job is to remain either neutral or offensive in the fight, you don't want to be defensive, and you're in an offensive position and he loses sight, you want to stay in offensive position because you both want to survive. We want to live to fly another day. So at that point, you're being directive with the guy to keep him offensive. So you're doing certain maneuvers to make sure that you stay offensive. So it's important to know those tactics inside and out, because if you don't, then you're just going to be a bag of sand in the back throwing up from all the maneuvers, because that's where you get airsick, is when you're doing BFM. So,
absolutely. Yeah.
So if you stay engaged and you make sure that you guys are working 100% as a team, then as soon as you hear the pilot say lost sight, or if you're flying with a junior guy, you can be like, hey, roll left. Tell him, you're like, hey, we're gonna remain offensive, or hey, the other guy just made a BFM error. Let's go and capitalize on that, and let's go offensive. So in the debrief, that's when you can really debrief pilots and other EWOs at this point. What errors people made, and that's when you do those events for your syllabus, like for your quals in the fleet, for being a mission commander, there's a BFM phase, and that's where you really learn everything you can possibly about BFM. And that's when you go into these flights, you brief up what we're going to be doing, you go out and execute it, you come back and debrief it, and we have a system that can show our aircraft in 3D, so you can see what our aircraft are doing, and you can look at top down, you can look at any sort of point of view that you want. So you can see, okay, this is where you made this error, so how would you fix that? And if they're wrong, you'd be like, no, I would recommend doing this. And then you can show with models, hey, what you did was incorrect. If you would have done this is what would have been the end result. So and I'm sure you're learning this too, being able to teach things, you learn it a lot better because you're able to see that light bulb go off and be like, okay, I taught that right, I'm going to keep doing that.
Absolutely.
So just stuff like that, like it. I definitely went down the rabbit hole in that one, but yeah, being in the back seat, instructing pilots, you when you gain that experience, you can be more directive instead of being descriptive, and they'll appreciate that because they know that you're involved and you're in this with them.
And I'm sensing a lot of trust there too. This is not something that if someone just says brake left, okay, why?
Yeah, exactly.
Do you really have the full picture, or are you just saying words?
Right.
So that trust has to be ingrained, I'm guessing, from not even day one, from day zero.
Absolutely, yeah. And I think that was the other portion of why I wanted to go Growlers, and really just pointy nose, because you guys are a team. There's no hesitation. If somebody says something, you're like, okay, yep, I'm going to do that, because you guys are both very well trained aviators, and we expect you to perform at that high level. So I don't know. I guess it was that challenge.
Absolutely.
That's what's great.
Yeah. Was you guys? And I'm jumping ahead here, but just the question occurred to me. Were you guys hard crew? Did you always fly with the same pilot, or really? So you just whoever was on the flight schedule that day.
Yeah.
Okay.
Which is good, because you get a good idea of how other people are in the aircraft. Like, some people are not as good, some people are amazing. So you get an idea. You're like, okay, I'm flying with this guy tomorrow, so I need to be a little bit more on top of my game than I normally am. Something like that.
Or certain things maybe you would focus on more or less based on that personality.
Yep.
So one thing I tell folks, and I'm kind of leading you in a direction here, you have a reputation, whether you realize it or not, as a student, as an instructor, as just an aviator in general. People know who you are, even if it's just one or two little data points. Mm-hmm. And so I'm not saying be someone fake or change who you are as a person. Just be cognizant of it. And as much as I hate this phrase, be better. Work to realize people are judging you, and frankly, you're judging them.
Yeah.
We're all doing that just naturally, instinctively. So the moment you recognize that, you can capitalize on that by doing the right thing, by continuing to think of others. And yeah, the two of you are in it together. You're only, a couple feet away from one another. Yeah. So if something happens to one of you, it's going to happen to both of you.
Right.
Okay, awesome. So we got you through, and just to be clear, the FRS VAQ 129, is that correct? Mm-hmm. Last thing I want to ask about on that air-to-air side of it, did you ever end up going to Key West?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. Went down there in the RAG. Never went down there in the fleet, but did go down there in the RAG for a couple weeks.
Okay.
Yep.
Was the so down there, obviously there is a reserve squadron. I believe it's a VFC 111, the Sundowners. Mm-hmm. So those guys fly F5s. Pretty basic jet, as I'm told. It starts up every time you go to fly it. It's an awesome machine, but obviously it's not, it's not a frontline fighter.
Right.
Those guys are the ones that are teaching you. So more senior, more experienced, 04, 05. I think there are a couple fleet guys there, but a lot of reserve folks that have done this for a while. Mm-hmm. And then they're the adversary aircraft that you're flying against. Am I butchering that too poorly?
Yeah, you're totally right. Like, that's their job, is to be red air, whether it's doing AWI, all weather intercept, like beyond visual range engagements, or BFM. Usually that's their bread and butter, is BFM, is going up and dogfighting. And I did that in Fallon with a lady there that was an aggressor pilot. And yeah, you can learn so much from something that's a lot smaller than you and a lot more maneuverable at times. So it's they're definitely an awesome asset to have.
Okay. When you graduated 129, did you know which fleet squadron you were going to at that point?
When I graduated, yes. So when you're complete with the syllabus, you put in or not when you complete, but shortly before you complete, you put in a dream sheet, a preference sheet. And the unique part of Growlers is there's a exped component, expeditionary, which is land-based. So that appealed to me, because as a EWO, I didn't really want to go to the aircraft carrier, because there was really none of that nostalgia of being able to fly an airplane onto the carrier. Because as an EWO, you're just in the back riding. You're just like, okay, pilot, please don't kill me today. So for me as a EWO, I was more looking at the aspect of, hey, let's have a good quality of life. Let's have a good time in the fleet. And I'm very, very glad I went that way. I was fortunate enough to get an expeditionary squadron, VAQ 134 Garudas. So went right from there in August of 2018 to VAQ 134. And and it was an incredible squadron, and great group of guys that I went through with.
Okay. So when you get to the squadron, obviously you're a winged aviator. You've got that basic qual in the back of the jet. Yep. But the training never ends. Right. So what was that kind of that workup cycle? Did you guys do a lot of workups before your initial deployment, or what did that look like?
So when I joined the squadron, they had just gotten back from deployment about 5 or 6 months earlier. So they were in maintenance phase. So they were really just trying to keep aircrew current in the jet. Had 1 or 2 up airplanes at the max.
Out of how many?
Usually we have 5 airplanes.
Okay.
So 3 of them or 4 of them were either in a maintenance or doing it like a certain inspection at some point. So so we had 1 or 2 up airplanes, and we were just keeping aircrew current. So it was a pretty slow start to my time in the fleet, which was fine. I know some guys, they go right from the RAG to deployment, and now you're just getting this water hose, this fire hose effect of, hey, learn all this stuff, learn the spins, learn how to fly off the boat, stuff like that. It gets to be pretty daunting. But I was fortunate to join a squadron where we were able to all kind of build up together, starting Workups, which was later that year in like December, January timeframe. That's when we started our workup cycle. And,
what do workups look like?
For an exped squadron, it's everybody, regardless of if you're a boat or an exped, you start in something called ARP, which is something that is done at the weapons school, which is in Whidbey. So you go over there, you learn almost everything again. You learn basic 101, electronic attack, electronic surveillance, all that stuff. So you learn that at the very basics again. And then you go over to the simulators and they do drills with you. So you start off very slow. Okay, let's prosecute one thing. Okay, great. Let's prosecute two things. And they just build you up and they just keep throwing stuff at you until it gets way too much. And then you can see where your pitfalls are. But their main thing is before you start anything, they want to make sure your basic procedures are solid. So that way, when it gets more complex, you can at least revert back to the basic procedures, which if they are correct, you can at least execute the mission effectively. So yeah, so you start off with ARP and then you'll move on to doing debts. So you usually go to Fallon to work with the F5s out there, but also just to get out of Whidbey because usually the weather's not the best most of the year. So you go to Fallon, which is in the desert, which the weather is usually better. However, it seemed like every time we went there, the weather was not great. We'd have to weather cancel. It's like, oh, this is why we're out of Whidbey. But yeah, you go out there, you work with, again, the weapons school guys. They'll come out there with you, and you just do more events out there to get you ready to go. For exped, your requirements for deployment, you needed to do 2 large force exercises. So that was either a red flag up in Alaska or at Nellis. Northern Edge, which is also a similar large force exercise, LFE, either or up in Alaska. And then just other events if needed, like we'll do little ones here and there to go augment a squadron or go do our own thing. So 2 LFEs were a requirement. And then other than that, because we didn't go to the aircraft carrier, we didn't have to do carrier quals like requals or get recurrent on stuff. So it was really that and a lot of unit level stuff, just working on skill sets, working on syllabi for people working on their level 2s, level 3s, because you need so many level 2s, level 3s, and level 4s on deployment. So depending on, and we have a training squadron in our squadron, so he would be the guy who monitors all that and make sure that we are working where we need to be, so that way by the time we go out the door on deployment, we have X number of people. So working on all that stuff, we use Sharp, which is similar to T-Sharp in the VTs here, and that keeps track of all our readiness. So the training officer, at the end of the day, when we're done doing flights, he'll tally up how many readiness tasks that people have done, and he'll input all that and see if it jives with Sharp, because our SDO would normally put it in at the end of the flight. The air crew, they're responsible for filling out a TNR sheet, a training and readiness sheet. So at the end of the flight, say, okay, yeah, we did BVR, beyond visual range stuff. We did low level stuff. We did this, we did that. So they'd mark all this stuff on a sheet, and then the SDO would put it into Sharp, and then that correlates into this matrix, and it shows where everybody's at. It'd be like, okay, hey, John Smith, you need to go do this stuff on your next flight because you are either yellow or red in it. So go work on this. So yeah, so there's quite a bit of stuff, but it's all flowed out, and you have time to do it usually. So yeah.
So with the benefit of time, we can look back. Day one, you walked into to your fleet squadron. What do you think now, looking back? What was your biggest blind spot? What was something that you think you could have worked more? I'm looking to give that advice to, again, that person showing up at a fleet squadron. Again, very critical of myself. I know things I would have done differently, things I would have said differently maybe. What do you think you would tell to yourself, looking back on it with the kind of the benefit of time?
Yeah, biggest thing is you want to be a people person. I've seen some new guys. I've seen people that may not have that, which isn't bad, but you want to make sure that you can integrate well with the squadron, because you guys are going to be working with each other. You guys and gals are going to be working with each other for the next 3 years very closely together. So you want to make sure that you interact with those guys and you get to know them, because you want to make sure that you guys can work well together as a team. The better you know each other, the more comfortable you will be around each other. So it's important to interact with everybody, get to know everybody. Even something as simple as like, hey, if you're eating lunch in the ops room, go eat lunch in the ready room where some other guys are eating. Like, just sit down and talk with them. Just be personable. And you being a new guy, understand your place, know that you do not know as much as everybody else in the squadron. So be there, be ready to just learn, and just absorb. Very similar to the VTs. Like, you're there to absorb and learn, because you are not at a level where you can teach or where you can correct somebody. So you are there to learn as much as you can. There will be a time when you get to a spot where you can correct people, and where you may have more experience than the other person, but at this point you do not. So
you have not arrived.
Yeah. A lot of people say shut up, new guy, and although it's a little bit aggressive, which I think's fine, it's definitely accurate, because you are there to learn. And so it's important that you show up, be a sponge still, even though you may have wings on your chest. Now you're qualified in the Growler. Congratulations. You still have a lot to learn. So show up, be a sponge, and just be a good person and interact with everybody, and you'll have a great fleet tour.
Be a good person. Yes, 100%.
Be a good person.
I often jokingly tell my wife I feel so bad for her, because she gets to hear all my hot takes, what I really think about a lot of stuff.
Sure.
I do not share that at work, because it's not needed, right? Like,
Right.
I think maybe the last 6 months of my time flying the 53, ironically when I got extended there, but maybe that was the time that I felt more comfortable trying to voice my opinion, and hey, this is what you should do here or there. But number one, there was always a lot more smarter folks surrounding me in the wardroom, so their advice in my mind mattered more than mine.
Yeah.
And second off, you also learn how to give folks feedback, because sometimes I think people, I think this is probably the fault of the movies, they think there's a lot of, I think it's like drill instructors, we're all yelling at each other and this and that.
Right.
No, it's how you speak to someone.
Yeah.
It's, I can also frankly tell what the intent is behind how someone is speaking to me, if they're talking down to me or if they really want to try to help me improve.
Right.
And so if you can notice that, other people notice that about how you communicate as well. I don't know that we ever teach folks that. I think you just, maybe by osmosis, you kind of figure it out. But okay, awesome. So how long were you, it would be before, obviously, going through workups, going out to Fallon, before you went out on your deployment?
So we left in July of 2019. So showing up would be for the FRS a little over 2.5 years. In the squadron, just under a year, 11 months. So yeah, we went to Qatar for 10 months, and we were there because Iran was acting up at the time. They were putting mines in the Strait of Hormuz, and they shot one of our drones down. So I think that was kind of the last straw for America. They said, okay, well, you guys, we're going to start sending people out. And they sent us out, and they had a carrier strike group out there as well. And Iran knew what they were doing. They were just trying to see what our response would be. And so we were sent out there in regards to that, and we flew off their coast for 10 months.
Yep, absolutely. And I hate to quibble on the one tiny point, because this is as the AMCM guy, the Airborne Mine Carriers, like I have to defend one little bit about my art.
Sure.
They were putting. I hate that term is so co-opted. A mine, generally in naval parlance, is it's in the water. A ship runs over it or passes near it. It goes off.
Yep.
They were placing explosives on ships.
Oh wow!
But you're absolutely right. That was reported a lot in the press, and
Yes.
I think they're mining the Strait of Hormuz. And the reason I mention that, I was in that part of the world as a co-pilot at the time, still in the 53. So yeah, we were all certainly watching that very, very closely. And some folks are not as tricky as they think they are. It's pretty easy to tell who's doing what. I'll just say it that way. We have incredible assets that our country operates. It's really quite impressive, and I saw about 0% of it. But it's very nice to know that we have not the talents, I guess you'd say, are pretty sharp. We're very good at knowing what we do.
Yeah.
And so, there's a reason why there's a lot of assets in that part of the world. And all that to say, an interesting time for sure. Kind of the messaging on the front-facing side, what you would see versus what was actually going on behind the scenes. It was pretty interesting to see stuff get declassified, at certain rates. A lot of it was being pushed open source, which was really kind of neat to see.
Nice, yeah.
And there's a reason you were there. The reason we were there as well. The Straits of Hormuz are incredibly important from a strategic perspective. Be it a carrier transiting, being it civilian maritime vessels transiting, a mine doesn't care. Right. A sea-based mine will take either of them out just as efficiently, unfortunately. Yeah. So it's a really important part of the world for that reason. But what was it like flying in the Persian Gulf?
It was interesting. It
got hot, I'm sure.
Extremely hot. Yeah, and I'm from Arizona, and I thought it would have been a big deal. Yeah, it turns out the desert can be humid and hot.
Indeed. So, yes.
Yeah, Qatar was pretty brutal during the summer. Yeah, I have a photo on my phone that says the high today will be 111 with a wind chill 122. You're just like, yep. I guess that's what happens when you have a hair dryer as your wind. So, yeah. So that was pretty brutal. Just getting through the summer, and then during the winter it was better. It was more temperate, and it wouldn't get super cold. It was flying around the Gulf. It was trying at times, flying around different countries and all that. We'd have to get these DIP clearances, these diplomatic clearances, to be able to fly into their airspace, and sometimes they would deny it just for whatever reason. So we would we'd sit on deck for 45 minutes trying to get a clearance, and they said, oh no, they either don't have your DIP clearance or they're not allowing it, this and that. So we'd have to cancel events because whoever was in the controller, whoever was controlling the airspace that day didn't want us to fly. So it was trying at times, and it would get frustrating. So it was it had its goods and others. It was cool at night, though, flying with night vision goggles. You could look across the Arabian Gulf and see deep into Iran, which is pretty cool. It turns out at 25,000 feet, Arabian Gulf isn't that wide. So
it's very small. Yeah, that's not a perspective I had. I think the highest I ever went was maybe 4,000 or 5,000 feet.
Wow,
so two very different worlds. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Flying a lot of deterrence missions, essentially, in that part of the world.
Yep. We were sent out there with the intent of doing DPP, which was deterrence, presence, and patrol. Our job was to fly up and down the Arabian Gulf off the coast of Iran and just mainly advise them of our presence. We were there. They could see that we were a fighter. So they said, okay, well, all right, we need to stop doing what we're doing. And there would be destroyers in the Arabian Gulf too. We'd have other U.S. Military vessels out there and coalition vessels. They would be out in the Arabian Gulf. And also in the Strait of Hormuz and out in the Gulf of Oman. Like, we'd have people everywhere, just ready to pounce if needed, if Iran wanted to keep acting up. So, and
like you mentioned, just because you don't have a gun in the Growler doesn't mean you don't have weapons. You have quite a suite of actually offensive and defensive weapons that you can use.
We can carry the AIM-120, which is a AMRAAM. It's a air-to-air missile, and then we have the AGM-88. ARM and ARGM. So those were our primary air-to-surface, air-to-ground missiles that we would use for hitting radar sites or any sort of surface-to-air system if needed. So mainly when we were flying over the Arabian Gulf, we would carry AIM-120 missiles. So we carried those on almost every sortie. We had live missiles on almost every sortie. We'd carry two, one on each cheek station next to the intakes on the Growler. And so it was cool. It became very routine. We got live missiles today. Just know.
Yeah.
But yeah, we are a very, very capable air-to-air platform. I mean, we have a very nice radar, APG-79 radar, that's very capable of interrogating air-to-air threats. So it was nice to have us in theater there in the event something were to happen. We could definitely prosecute enemy air-to-air aircraft, so no issues there.
So obviously you've done large force exercises in the U.S., so you dealt with U.S. coalition aircraft. What's that like, but now overseas in that deployed environment?
Yeah. So we interacted with the Qatari Air Force because we were based in Qatar. Those guys are not at the level that we're at, and I mean that's the way it is. I mean they're a small country and we're a big country with a lot more toys, I should say, than them.
A different mission set too. They're keyed up for different things, defending their country.
Yeah, they're mainly home defense. We did some basic air-to-air stuff with them. Very basic tactics, very similar to the VT-86 tactics. They're very basic air-to-air tactics because that's where they're at, and they fly older Mirage F1s. They're cool airplanes. We just did very basic stuff with them. Nice guys, interact with them. They're just like us. They're flying airplanes and they're having a good time. So we got to do that with them. We worked with the UAE a little bit, but mainly we worked with other U.S. assets. We would work with some British assets and Australian assets as well. We didn't really interact with the Saudis at all. They weren't really flying out there with us. Okay. I think they were kind of just doing their own thing, kind of like Qatar, just home defense sort of thing. So, but the Qataris, they wanted to work with us since we were right there on the same field as them. So it worked out. It worked out really well. The British and the Australians, they are very, very good at what they do. They were really good out in theater when we would fly, do OIR missions and stuff like that. We would work with the British or the Australians. They were very, very good at what they did with airborne controlling. And it was pretty seamless, which is great because we all strive to learn the same tactics, the same procedures. So that way, when we go into a dynamic environment such as wartime, we have a good idea of what we're trying to do. So Yeah, so it was good. Yeah, long story short.
Sure. We're testing my ignorance here. Is there a British equivalent, a fast jet equivalent to the Growler? Obviously, the Australians have the Growler as well.
Yes.
But is there a British? It is a Tornado, I'm guessing.
An
electronic attack version of it, or do
they don't have any electronic attack?
Really? Okay.
No. It's just we're the only. The Australians and the Navy are the only people that have the Growler, and the Growler is the only tactical electronic attack aircraft in the world. So.
Okay. Why do you think that is? It's the palm tree. Yeah. Why do you think that is?
It's a good question.
Not asking you to decide national policy
right.
at the table here, but
I think some of it. There are other countries that want to buy it, like Germany, Sweden, Finland. Like other people want to buy the Growler. It's just a matter of pushing it to them.
Okay.
More so now with the way the world is going, military technology is going. A lot of it is going electronic attack. You'll see. Enemy aircraft will have EA pods, jammer pods on them to try to spoof our radars. So it's important to know and try to push to other countries, other allied countries, that electronic attack is the future, and that's where war is going to be going. Because the more technology people have, the more technology people are going to have to ruin that technology, and we're going to see ourselves going to more rudimentary methods. So it's important to be able to fight fire with fire in this case, knowing that the enemy is investing a lot of money in electronic attack. So
we want to be on the leading edge of that offensive and defensive capability.
Yeah. And I mean, there are only so many Growlers in the U.S. inventory, so it'd be nice to have other countries with the Growler as well. And I mean, they would all come train with us, so that way we know exactly what's going on. And yeah, it's a very capable airplane. So the more we have, the better we will be in a wartime environment.
And it seems like an airplane that doesn't have an expiration date. The Prowler, obviously designed on the A6. An older machine from those that I've spoken with that flew it, both on the Navy and the Marine Corps side, seemed very capable. It went out as the best version of that airplane that it would ever be.
Yeah.
But then there's things that obviously the Growler does even better. And I'm guessing there will be at some point a replacement. Who the heck knows what that will be? But a long time from now, because it's a very capable airplane with a lot of room to grow.
Yeah, absolutely. The nice thing is that the Super Hornet, it's essentially the same airframe, so most of the parts are interchangeable. So if we're on a carrier and the Growler has a part that goes bad, we can look at the VFA squadrons and say, hey, we need this certain part. And they'll be like, oh, yeah, we got it. And then you can put it in the Growler and it's 100% ready to go because it's the same airplane, essentially. So having that oh, man, I can't even say the word. Having that interoperability piece.
Words are hard. I get it.
Yeah. Having that is crucial in a wartime environment, especially when airplanes get damaged, either from combat or just from wear and tear. It's good to have that. And being able to interact with other countries is going to be massive too, because as long as everybody's on the same page, it should be relatively seamless. And that's the nice part, is having that integration. So
cool. So we talked about that deployment. I want to kind of jump back to it there. So you talked about kind of current events going on in the world. Anything else that kind of influenced your time out there in Qatar?
In terms of what?
I'm trying to remember. So obviously, I remember the Iranians shot down the BAMS-D drone. There was a little bit of drama there early 2020 timeframe, I think.
Oh yeah. There was Soleimani and Baghdadi. Yeah. Killing Baghdadi and Soleimani. Those were, I'm sure, as you can imagine, pretty big spool ups.
They were definitely for the debt in Bahrain.
Yep. Yeah. And then that. Fuel refinery in Saudi Arabia getting hit, the Aramco.
I remember that,
fuel refinery getting hit. Yep, we were out there for all of that stuff. So yeah, something would happen. It'd be like, okay, we're going to war, and then a week goes by, and I guess we're not going to war. And, just politics prevail in this case. And so all this stuff would happen, and we thought we'd be going home, but then something like that would happen. It'd be like, well, we're not going home now. So it was just a constant spool ups and spool downs of what's going to be happening next. So. So Soleimani and Baghdadi happened, and we were, in our dorm rooms watching the TV, seeing what, President Trump was going to say at the time, and seeing if he was going to say, okay, U.S. forces are going in tomorrow or something, to Iran. And we're like, oh boy, here we go. But then he just came back and said he was going to impose sanctions on Iran. So we said, okay. So politics prevail again in this case.
Sure.
So yeah, I mean, there were some times where, it got a little scary. Be like, okay, well, let's see what's going to happen. We might go to war. And we, us being, there in theater, we were constantly working on stuff. In the event it did happen, we were ready to go. We weren't just going to be blindsided by it. So we had some great guys in the squadron that would prepare all that stuff ready to go if needed. So yeah. So it was an interesting time. It was, yeah, definitely needed some blood pressure medication at times out there.
What was it like being on, and you mentioned the expeditionary life, you're on an Air Force base. It's a Qatari Air Force base, but then there's a big U.S. Air Force presence.
Right.
What was that like as opposed to being back at Whidbey where it's all haze gray, it's all Navy on the base?
Yeah, it was good. The Air Force takes care of their people, which is great. They had a really nice gym. They had a movie theater. They even had a food court. I mean, they had all this stuff there. They even had an education center that had an FAA testing center in there. Like, so I took my Ishmet written out there. Like,
really?
Yeah, and yeah, having Wi-Fi was incredible. I was able to talk to my wife almost every day, and yeah, it was definitely a lot of nice things that you take for granted if you were on like an aircraft carrier or on a boat on deployment, where you don't have that luxury of checking email or watching a movie on Netflix every day. Like that, it's just stuff that you became accustomed to because it was an Air Force base. So,
of course.
yeah, yeah, it was. We had everything we needed out there. Yeah,
Totally fair. Totally
fair.
What's a standard, and big air quotes here because there's no such thing as a standard flight, but what was a standard flight like on that deployment? Where would you go? What would you do?
It varied. So usually, if we were just doing an Arabian Gulf flight, we would call it the AG Air Nav. We'd have our nav points, and we would just fly up and down the Arabian Gulf, talking to Kuwait, Saudi, coming back, talking to the same controllers. Yeah, just go up and down. Take about 2 hours, 2.5 hours. If we were doing unit level training, ULT, we would go to these little airspaces out there off of the coast of UAE, and we would do maritime employment. We'd practice basic tactics for that. We would also practice doing air-to-air stuff if we had enough airspace to do it in, and sometimes we'd just go out there to burn flight time. We'd also get with some tankers occasionally and practice tanking, because usually we wouldn't need to tank if we were doing 2 hours, 2.5 hour sorties. So we wanted to make sure that everybody would stay current on tanking for longer missions if needed. So we would, and they were looking to play with people. They were looking to come out and practice. So we said, okay, yeah, we could use the practice if needed. So yeah, we would sometimes get with those guys and practice tanking. And other than that, it was pretty mundane out there. It got boring.
That's a good deployment, though.
Yeah.
When it's exciting, that's when you want to worry.
Right.
So,
yeah.
Okay, so I'm a new guy showing up. I don't know. I for some reason, I'm a replacement in your squadron. I know I'm going out to that AOR. I know I'm going out on roughly that same type of deployment. What's the advice you'd pass to those new folks? What will you maybe focus on this, be ready for this? What was your thought process for that?
Yeah, biggest thing is on the SIPR side, the secret side, just studying tactics of the threat nation. So in this case, Iran, studying up on what they have in their inventory, studying up on what tactics they would have. And looking in the 3TAC1, which is like the threat guide for our adversaries. So looking in that and just try to brush up on all their weapon systems, especially like surface-to-air missile systems. Like look up like the bands that they run and like the frequencies and stuff, because like that's our bread and butter. Like we want to be able to hit that stuff. So you can look up all that on SIPR, and just research as much as you can. So when you come out, you're well versed and all that stuff. That was the biggest thing for us, was learning all that stuff. So
sounds like staying in the books is something you're going to do your whole aviation career.
Yes, absolutely.
An eternal theme. Okay, cool.
Yep.
Speaking of eternal themes, did you get a call sign prior to going out on deployment? Already had it when you were out there? Did you earn it out on deployment?
I got it while we were out there.
Okay.
So I didn't really do anything, I guess, dumb enough in the squadron to get a good call sign, I should say. But it is an acronym. Yeah, DODO. It's so if I don't get enough sleep the night before to stay awake, I usually fall asleep in the brief. So it stands for dozes off during orientation.
Okay.
So DODO, and I think it's also it has a couple meanings, because I fly on the civilian side as a pilot, and being an NFO or an EWO in the Navy, so it had a double meaning.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Fair enough. Yeah.
Yeah.
It always made me sad. My last name is More, M-O-R-E, More. So much potential, so many mean things people could say, and I was really ready for it the whole time. Like, well, I'm sure I won't like it, but I'll respect that they'll be mean enough to get, and never unfortunately happens. So.
Dang, yeah.
Mine's my middle name, but okay, no worries. Okay, so that one deployment out to LUD,
yes,
back to the U.S.,
yes,
but in between there, I think the world changed a little bit.
It did.
How did it change for you guys?
Yeah, it was almost as scary as almost going to war with Iran, because we thought we would never come home. So December of 19 rolls around, January, February of 20. Okay, COVID's becoming a big thing now. And by the time April rolled around, when we were ready to be coming home, the whole world was engulfed in COVID. And all these countries and all these governments are trying to figure out how they're going to handle this, let alone bring a squadron of people home from deployment. And so our biggest thing was coming back from Qatar to Washington was the tankers, and if we had to divert somewhere, we were going to have to we were going to have to quarantine for 2 weeks in a divert. So it was extremely stressful getting home, because we had these super long transits over large bodies of water, and we were so reliant on tankers to bring us from point A to point B. And the diverts, we were super scared if we were going to have to divert, because then we would be stuck there for 2 weeks, let alone trying to get a maintenance crew in there to fix a jet. And there were just so many logistics that went into this that it was super nerve-wracking. So luckily, nothing big happened. All the aircraft got home at the same time. Everybody made it. The tankers were great. They got us from IED in Qatar to Rota, Spain in one leg. Multiple tankers coming out of Qatar and Rota having to meet us at the right time. Like, it's impressive to see that work and see that magic happen. And luckily, all the pilots were able to tank, luckily, and get gas. And we all made it somewhat uneventfully to Rota. We stayed at the hotel in Rota for 1 or 2 days, I want to say. And then, flew from Rota to Oceana, and that was across the Atlantic. So that was like a 9-hour flight, and in the dry suit, which was fun, in the poopy suit. So that was, you got used to it, but it sucked. But landing in Oceana, it was great to be on U.S. soil. But it was crazy to get out of the airplane, and all these like customs people are coming up to us in masks and asking us to wear masks. And it's like, man, 10 months before, the U.S. was, it was. I mean, it's still great, but it was a lot different.
Yes. Yes.
So coming back to a country that's in quarantine was very weird. It was very, it was sad, because usually you see guys come home from deployment, all their families are out there to meet them. They have like a big American flag up. They have like bouncy houses up for people, for the kids.
For the kids, just to be clear.
Mainly for the kids. Maybe I might jump in, but so getting to Oceana, waiting a couple days for a storm to pass and our tankers to line up, and then we get home to Whidbey, and there's nobody there. We show up to a ghost town. We pull our jets in. We're all in tan flight suits because we're coming back from the desert, and the wings there's like 3 or 4 people there from the wing saying, "Welcome back, guys," and we're like, "Thanks," and we all just got into our respective cars and went home. No families to greet us or anything.
What a way to end a deployment.
And I was really excited because I was flying in a jet coming back home, and like I wanted to come back home from a long deployment like that in a jet. Like, it'd be super cool, and come home in a jet to a ghost town. It was sad, and it was a big letdown for me. Getting home, but then got in the car, drove home, got to see my wife and see the dog and all that. So it all worked out. But it was just crazy to come home, and we didn't really feel like we were home for a long time because everything was quarantined. We couldn't go out and eat at restaurants, so we were stuck at our house.
So you were physically there, but it was a different, totally different feeling.
Physically there, but mentally, still not really home.
That's fair.
Yeah, so we were in a weird spot mentally, and again, going back to being personable and knowing everybody in your squadron, everybody had a tough time, at some point during the deployment. Everybody had a tough time mentally, and that's when you can kind of pick up on social cues and figure if somebody's doing okay that day or not. So you always just look out for each other, more so when you get home too, because you guys were all just with each other, so you guys quarantine, and then you slowly come back to work, and you try to do stuff with people. But even then, May of 2020, COVID was massive. It was still a big thing. So so you just tried to be careful what you did with people, but you still wanted to hang out with each other and keep tabs on each other, because because everybody's important.
What was it like flying the jet across the pond? You mentioned 9-hour flight. What the heck is that like in a poopy suit? You got a little bit of room in the way it's been described to me, the Hornet cockpit front and back. You've got a decent amount of room compared to maybe like an A4 or some of those older legacy airframes, but even then it's not that much room.
No, it's not. Comparatively speaking, speak, into like a T-45 or an A4, yeah, it's a big cockpit. So yeah, we would, get in the cockpit. I mean, you'd have like a bag with snacks, and then your regular helmet bag with your knee board and approach plates if needed. So yeah, you would just hang out back there. You'd have your piddle packs, your absorbent packs for going number 1 if needed. God forbid you had to go number 2. It wasn't going to happen.
That's what the helmet bag is for.
Yeah, with the poopy suit. Yeah, good luck.
Oh my, yeah.
But yeah,
pin the seat and do your best, I guess.
Yeah. So yeah, you would, you just, make sure you drink water every now and then, eat some snacks. But other than that, you're just focusing on when you're plugging into the tanker next and you're just watching your gas the entire time. After every tank, after every onload of gas, you're like, okay, we're at this fuel state. You're keeping tabs on your alternates. Like really, it was just the Azores. If we needed to land there, it was either the Azores or northeastern Canada, like Nova Scotia. Like those were our 2 spots that we could divert, other than turning around and going back to Spain. So that's the biggest thing is, the Growler has a system that you can load MP3 files to. So we would just listen to music, and we went through that playlist probably 20 times. Oh my gosh. Just kept listening to the same songs, which was great. I mean, it's definitely better than just having silence. So yeah, it was good. And the guy that I flew with across the pond, he was our jumpso, and he was in charge of putting all that music on. So he was taking requests from people. Hey, what music do you want in the jet for the transit? So he'd say this, and he was a big Michael Jackson fan. So he put a bunch of Michael Jackson songs on. So I would play it, and he would sing in the cockpit while we're flying, and I'd sing with him and stuff. It was fun. We could make the time pass.
You got to make the time go by. Yeah, absolutely. And like you said, that's part of that being a good person. You've got to learn. You learn one another's personalities. You learn when someone's not feeling well, when someone is feeling well, and that way you can kind of adjust. It's part of the, I don't know, maybe that intangible. I don't know if leadership is the right term, but yeah, it's you can tell the folks that have it, and you can tell the folks that are still working on it. And those are the folks you try to help, but you also want to be around people that have that. So hopefully that's another kind of lesson people pick up on. It's not just about you. So yeah, that's really cool that y'all got to experience. That's a long time in the back of an airplane.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. It was good though.
Okay,
yeah.
Awesome. And let me one last deployment question, I promise.
Yep.
Any memorable flights? Anything when you were out there at LUD? Maybe a highlight flight or a low light, just something good or something bad that really sticks out.
I guess the one highlight was doing an OIR mission, Operation Inherent Resolve. So we flew over Iraq and Syria.
Okay.
And I led the flight out there. There's 2 of us going out there, and I was with the XO at the time, who was the skipper when I left. Great guy, and he. So that was a 8.9 sortie. Whew. So yeah, that was again a lot of tanking. But that was in the middle of the night. We took off, I think, at like 8 o'clock, and then we landed at, like 5 a.m. or something like that. So it was a long night, and you would take your go pills, like it would just be. It's not amphetamines. That was the old go pill stuff. But yeah, you would take these pills to help keep you awake, and you'd be wearing night vision goggles the whole night too, so your neck would be sore. But yeah, we were up there just flying along, just keeping Russia at bay and stuff like that. So it was a good flight, and it was cool to do an actual quote combat flight. But yeah, we were out there again, just having a presence, and yeah, we had tankers up there and working with that, and yeah, it was cool to kind of do what everybody else was doing out there for a change. Like people were going into Afghanistan, going up into Iraq and Syria, and here we are just flying over the Arabian Gulf, just doing our own little thing. But sure. It was cool to be part of that for the little time that we were doing that particular portion for. So it was cool.
Yeah, but all those mission sets, I get it. They're not all probably as exciting to the layperson, but they're all incredibly important. Yeah. There's a reason you're there. There's a reason that's not just doing it to burn some Jet A.
Yeah. But yeah, that would be the highlight, I guess, for me, like actually doing one of those flights. And
heck yeah.
Yeah, at the time it sucked, but looking back, it was cool. Like it was cool to be able to be out there and be in the thick of it, so to speak, with other assets. It was cool. And
absolutely.
Yeah, that flag over there, I flew that flag. You probably can't see it, but hanging on the back of the hangar there. Yeah, but that was. I carried that flag with me, and then I also carried a bunch of other flags. I probably carried close to 20, 25 flags on deployment for various people, for like friends back home, for family and stuff. So I would give those flags to people, and it's crazy for them. It makes their they accept it. It's such an honor for them, and for me, like it was just me flying another sortie, and for them, it's the coolest thing ever.
It is. So. It's a tangible connection to that because they got to be part of that with you.
Yeah.
Through that
Yep.
flag. That's really awesome, man.
Yeah.
Okay, so after the Fleet Squadron, how does it go into choosing orders? The Navy is going to send you where the Navy needs you. That's
Yeah.
the process. I get it.
Yeah.
What was the kind of the dream sheet leaving Whidbey, or did you want to stay at Whidbey? How does that work?
So when my slate options came out, I had the opportunity to come to 86, go to 129, the RAG, or go to VX30 in, I think it was in, I want to say Point Mugu.
Point Mugu? Yeah, that's what I was going to say.
Yeah, Point Mugu in California. So I only have 3 options on my slate.
Wow.
And that was pretty small.
Yeah.
Usually pilot guys have like 10. Like
I've seen even more.
Yeah, that's crazy.
And a lot of them are non-flying, just to be clear. There might only be 2 or 3 that are maybe desirable flying stuff. The rest of them might be non-flying jobs.
Yep. But it worked out well for me because I wanted either 86 or the RAG. So 86 was number 1, 129 was 2, and then VX30 was 3. But I was calling and putting my name on hangar waiting lists here and in Point Mugu just in case, because I had the plane here still. So It's just one of those things. You got to plan for everything.
Sure,
you never know. It worked out because our detailer, he was a department head with me when I joined the squadron, and he was there for us. He was with us on deployment and all that. So then he went right from our squadron to Millington and became the VAQ detailer. So he already had an idea of what I wanted, and he obviously knew me. So, I put down those 3 choices. That didn't take long at all. It was mainly the little blurb on why I wanted 86. So I worked on that for a little while. A guy in my squadron, he's now down in Key West flying F5s with VFC 111. Him being a former Blue Angel, he knew how to really make stuff sound really nice. So I wrote up a blurb and I looked over to him and showed it to him. I said, "Hey, how can I make this sound better?" And then he gave me his 2 cents, which was great. So I sent it to my skipper. Skipper sent it off, and then about a month and a half later, heard back, got 86, which was my number 1 choice, and and then left like 4 months later. So it was great. Yeah,
that's really cool. So, and let me make sure again, I kind of paint the picture here. So VT-86, obviously there are fleet pilots and then fleet NFOs.
Yep.
EWO in your case, obviously.
Yeah, EWO was those. Yeah.
Yep. So, but the students are going through the T-45 syllabus, so they're in the back of the T-45. What do you do? How do you interact with them? How do you mentor them? How do you teach them?
So the instructor NFOs, I'll just call us NFOs, so
Fair
that
enough,
way I don't
yep.
have to say EWOs and WIZOs every time. But yeah, NFOs. So yeah, we primarily work with them in the simulators. The VFA NFO, I guess I can say WIZOs here. The WIZOs, the VFA NFOs, those guys usually have FAC-A's, like forward air controller experience. So they will go out on close air support CAS sorties for the students and play FAC-A's.
Really?
And work with them on working with like a guy on the ground. Like they will simulate being a JTAC on the ground as well. So like they make it very realistic, which is great. So those guys will go out on flights and work with the students that way. Primarily, NFOs are in the simulator running the sims.
Okay.
And then the pilots, of course, handle the flight side stuff.
Makes sense.
That is our primary interactions. We do academic classroom instruction and then the simulator instruction.
Okay. And then obviously, I know you had a decent amount of time in the T-45. What's that been like? Now you're not being evaluated. You're,
Yeah, it's great, and it's. I'm still trying to get used to it because it is great. I mean, I did a lot of just fun flights in the Growler too. We would just go out and go do whatever for the day. But yeah, in the T-45, it's great because it's dual control, which I love. So I'm able to fly as much as the pilot will let me. I've had some pilots let me fly from chocks to chocks, which is fantastic. So I get to do everything. And what's also great too is a lot of the pilots have they've done the military competency for CFIs and CFIIs. So I'm able, when we go out and shoot approaches and stuff, and I'm at the controls doing all that, I log it in my civilian logbook and I'm using it for the civilian rating. So
wow.
Like being able to fly around in a jet and get instrument time is awesome. Because one, it saves me money having to put gas in this airplane, and two, it's cool to get a different exposure and get to fly TAC and approaches, because I obviously can't do that in the civilian world, even though it's synonymous with the VOR approach. But yeah, it's just being able to stay proficient on the approaches when I'm not flying in this airplane. So
absolutely,
it's great. Yeah.
Rate the airplane. Rate the Goshawk. Where would you say it's got strengths? Where would you say it's got areas that it could improve?
Good acceleration.
Okay.
It's small, so it doesn't carry a lot of gas, which is fine. Like the average sortie is an hour to a 1.3 at the most. Usually 1.5s are a little bit long. That's usually for like cross countries, like straight and level air nav stuff. It's not good at BFM. It is a pretty poor aircraft at BFM. The stabilators, they tend to pitch buck at 5 Gs, meaning essentially they stall out, and the nose will just porpoise. It'll just go up and down, and it'll literally buck, hence the name. So it's a horrible jet at BFM, which good thing it's not a fleet airplane.
Yeah.
But the Growler is a fantastic airplane when it's not loaded down with weapons and pods. It's a great BFM aircraft. So it not so much for T-45 stuff. Like the students see very basic canned maneuvers, very pre-rehearsed maneuvers. So they are just getting the basics down. So when they go to the fleet and they get in the Growler, they get more advanced tactics. So it's good. So it's a good introduction aircraft, but yeah, not a great airplane to BFM with.
Okay.
It's the radios are old. I mean, the airplanes are old. They're inherently old. So the technology that comes with them, like we don't have RNAV in the aircraft, so we can't shoot RNAV approaches. We're limited to ILS, VOR TACAN, and GCA approaches. Like that's all we can do.
Sure.
So the T6 is more capable in the instrument arena than the T-45. Heck, this airplane's more capable than the T-45 in the instrument arena. So, yeah. In that regards, like it does its job well. It's going to be hard to find a replacement for it in terms of the Navy. Like everything's with money and trying to set aside budgets and stuff like that. So we'll see what they come up with next. But it does its job well, and it's been designed that way to do so.
What was the biggest transition from a gray airplane back into an orange and white airplane mentally? Obviously, now you're instructing, so there's that whole different side of it.
Yeah. Knowing that I'm coming to a VT squadron, I was told to lower my expectations.
Okay. And
rightly so. I mean, the students are nowhere near a fleet aviator, so it happens. I mean, that stuff I just needed to be told and actually seen it. You need to be patient. You need to learn patience with the students. I call them kids a lot because, I mean, they really are. I mean, these kids are right out of college. So yeah, it's important to know where they're at and remember where you were when you were on their side of the table and help them get to where they need to be. And for me, I've always been kind of a non-confrontational person. So for me, like having to tell somebody they messed up or having to drill somebody on how to make them better, for me, I want to be more easygoing and make it fun for the kids rather than, grueling. But sometimes kids need that. Sometimes they need this exposure to highly dynamic environments, and then you can pull those learning points out of it at the end of the event. So for me, it's going to be getting into the swing of things where I know where these kids are mentally, and I can help them push their comfort zone to see where their true abilities are. So for me, it's going to be getting in that instructor mindset.
Makes sense. Yeah.
Not being confrontational, but understanding that I need to now reach out of my own comfort zone and not just be more standoffish. I need to be making sure that I'm engaging these kids as much as possible and making sure that I'm pushing them. Because for me, like, I enjoy flying, and flying should be fun. And for me, I want to make it fun for these kids. And it should be at times, it should be fun, but they're here to learn and challenge and make themselves better. And I mean, yeah, some people may have fun getting their, what kicked in, but usually it's not.
No, that's absolutely true. So, I had a recent experience with a friend who I won't mention his name, but if he hears this, he'll know who I'm talking about. We went out to a range to go shoot, and just put some rounds through a pistol. And I hadn't gone shooting in a while, and he's very serious. He does this as a profession, actually, so he's obviously incredibly skilled. Yes. And I just, grabbed the pistol, and I think I have my basic pistol qual from OCS. I carry, but I don't have near the amount of reps that I would need to feel comfortable in the world that he lives in. And so, a couple targets, I shot a little bit, and, the target comes back on the little machine, and his shots are all grouped very tightly, and mine are all over the place. And I don't even know if he knew that he was instructing, but some of the, hey, maybe try this or look at that. And in retrospect, looking back, I realized he is a great teacher because he could just do that instinctively. Wow. I didn't even in the moment realize he was teaching me. Wow. Afterwards, with the benefit of time, I'm like, oh, holy moly, that's exactly what he was doing. That's and he impressive. Wasn't confrontational. He wasn't a jerk. Mm-hmm. He didn't make it a competition. It's an important skill, so obviously it's one that I wanted to get better at, but that is that advanced, 5, 6, 7-star level of teaching that I aspire to. Right. The thing that I try to do with students now at VT10 especially is, tell me how that went. I know, this is not a mystery. I know how that ILS went. I know how well you did on that PAR. What I want is to see, number one, if they recognize that they either did well or did poorly, and very honest. If anything, I don't know if you experienced this, but honest to a fault. A lot of times they'll know exactly what they messed up and they're happy to tell you. Sometimes they'll tell you things that, I'll be honest, I missed. I'm like, oh, I'm really glad you owned up to that, because I actually was focused on these other more important things, but I'm glad. Okay, now we'll talk about that as well. So I like it when folks can be honest and debrief themselves. And I found exactly what you're talking about, that non-confrontational style. If you tell me what you're doing wrong, okay, cool. Now we're both on the same page. Now it's you and I versus the problem, and we'll go out and fix it together.
Yep.
So, Tanner, I appreciate you giving me a bunch of your time, man. One last thing I would be remiss if I didn't ask about is that beautiful airplane that's sitting behind you.
Yeah.
Tell me about your North American Navion.
Yeah. So yeah, this airplane, her name's Olivia.
Did you name the plane, or did it have?
I did.
You did.
Yep,
Okay.
I did name the plane. I just like the name. I just think it sounds nice.
Okay.
Just to me
It's
personally.
not like an old girlfriend or
No.
okay.
Yeah, my wife, because I would love to name a daughter, if we have a daughter, Olivia, but my wife says, I know too many Olivias, so no. And I said, okay, well, I'm going to name the plane Olivia. And she's like, that's fine. So
Okay.
her name's Olivia.
Okay.
So yeah, people who don't know about Olivia think I'm talking about a mistress or something. But
Oh my.
Which she very much is a mistress, because I do spend a lot of time with her.
And money.
And money,
Yep.
yes. But yes, so Olivia was built November 7th of 1946. So she's 76 years old. And she's been well taken care of over the years. It has an IO550B engine in it, which is 300 horsepower. So a lot of oomph for the airplane. It's super roomy inside, 4-passenger with a sliding canopy, which is a cool selling point. Being built by North American, same manufacturer as the P-51. So it's meant to look like a Mustang to a certain extent. If you were to look at a P-51 tail and look at a Navion tail, they're almost identical in terms of shape. And it was built as North American's first civilian aircraft. So after the war, they had all this surplus aluminum, and they wanted to keep people employed. So they said, hey, why don't we design an aircraft for the civilian market? So they came up with the Navion, and it's a very, very well-built airplane. It's built out of, like I said, surplus World War II aluminum. So it's thicker than normal general aviation aluminum. It's the same aluminum that Mustangs and B-25 Mitchells were built out of. So it's a very sturdy and heavy airplane. So it rides very well. It's a great cross-country airplane. It holds 40 gallons in the main tank. Technically the main tank is 2 tanks, one in each wing. It fills up just on the right wing only, and has a cross-flow tube that goes to the other tank.
Really?
So it's kind of a unique aspect of general aviation where everybody goes to one wing to fill up and the other wing to fill up. So with the Navion, it's only the one side, and it flows to the other side. So 40 gallons, and then this airplane is equipped with tip tanks, so it has 20 gallons on each wingtip. So you can hold an additional, with both tanks filled up, 40 gallons, so 80 gallons total.
That's a lot of fuel.
Yeah, it's a lot of gas. So this weekend, for example, we were able to make 2 nonstop flights from Ferguson to Corpus Christi and follow the coastline all the way down. And then on the way back, did the same thing. Had a nice tailwind on the way back and averaged about 160 to 170 knot total ground speed. So had a nice 30 or 40 knot tailwind up high. And just cruised back. And like I said, the airplane's super roomy inside. So my wife, she just watched some Netflix shows, and I just monitored the airplane, and smooth sailing airplane, and looks good too.
Where'd you find it? How did you two become acquainted with each other?
So I found her on Barnstormers. So those who are not familiar with Barnstormers, it's like Trade a Plane or Auto Trader, for airplanes.
Absolutely.
It's very similar. Found it online, and I've always liked the Navion. Flew in one when I was in the RAG up in Whidbey, and it cemented my love for the airplane. Very easy flying airplane, very comfortable to fly in. And so I found this one on Barnstormers and reached out to the owner, and I asked a lot of questions. At one point, he wasn't going to sell me the airplane because he thought that I was working with lawyers and trying to find skeletons in the closet of the airplane. So I had to essentially beg him to let me continue with the sale, because this is my first airplane. He's like, I can tell it's your first airplane based on the number of questions you're asking me. And I'm like, okay. And so guy's nice. He was an AMPIA, so fully authorized to do all the work on the airplane. He put the bigger engine on it, and I think he redid the panel as well. But other than that, everything else was on the airplane when he bought it, including the paint job. And then so I picked it up in November of 2018, and flew her back from Colorado to Washington that same weekend when I did buy the airplane. Luckily, the weather held out because Colorado to Washington during the winter is really unpredictable, and luckily the weather held out and the forecasts were holding up. So, yeah, brought the plane back and kept her in Anacortes, Washington since I got her, and then flew her down here.
Just like I asked about the T-45, strengths and weaknesses. What do you like about the airplane? What do you wish you could change?
Well, the age of the airplane, it definitely shows that at times. I mean, it's an old airplane, so things break. And it's just like with cars. The older they get, more things break at the same time. So it seems like with this airplane, there's always something going on. So it's never, the airplane is never at 100%, which if it is, it's going to be like that for maybe a couple weeks or a month, and then something breaks. So it's, older airplanes, like, it's just inherent. Things are going to break more often. I would say I wish it went a little faster, but 140 knots, like 140 knots is good. Like it's good. Like it's not great. It's not bad. It's right in the middle. This airplane does a lot of things really well. It doesn't do one thing really, really well. It's just kind of a jack of all trades. So, and I've heard like in terms of owning a small airplane and spending a lot of money, it's a practical airplane. It's roomy, so you can fly people around. This was an investment for me, and I plan on keeping this airplane for a long time because it is a practical airplane. It's good to fly around places, and as long as the weather's good, you can get places, a third of the time than you would if you had to drive. So, I would say, in terms of roominess, in terms of general aviation aircraft, this aircraft excels in that. If it does excel in anything, it would be the interior of the aircraft. It's super roomy inside and very comfortable. You can sit in that seat for hours on end and not get a hot spot or get uncomfortable. So it's nice.
I know you've done a lot of form flying in the airplane. Any memorable form flights? Form done anything cool? Any warbirds?
So I've done a 5-ship with this for a July 4th flyover. I've done that a couple times now up in Washington. We had a good warbird group up there, really good warbird group. A lot of guys just wanting to fly together. So we did that a few times. So flying in a 5-ship was really cool. And I wish I had smoke on this airplane. It would make those formation flights a lot nicer. But doing the formation stuff, I really enjoy doing that. And this airplane is really good to fly formation, and the visibility, despite being a low wing, is very good. So it's good to fly formation in, and it looks good too. So it's a nice airplane to fly with formation, or fly with in formation. And other than that, though, like just flying around, going from point A to point B is great too. It's a very smooth flying airplane. So
I know you've done a lot of Young Eagle flights in the airplane. Can you talk a little bit about the Young Eagles program?
Yeah, Young Eagles program is great. It's where I started when I was a kid. Right after I did that T6 flight, after my first flight, I got into Young Eagles, and I still keep in touch with the Young Eagles coordinators of that chapter, which they still are the chapter, Young Eagle coordinators. I still keep in touch with them. One of them was my private pilot instructor, so he helped me get my license, and he's helping me do my instrument rating here next month. I'm flying him out here from Phoenix, and he's going to work with me on that. And so the Young Eagles program is great, taking up kids age through 8 through 17, and taking them up for some of them for their very first flight in a small airplane. So and it's all free. The pilots volunteer their time and volunteer the gas. So it's a great program to be a part of and expose these kids. And definitely nowadays it's good to get these kids exposed into something that is worthwhile and challenging for them to be motivated and work towards. Instead of listening to Nicki Minaj and these really great role models out there.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, all jokes aside, speaking of great role models, some of the most wonderful people I've met have been at the airport and have been so willing to give their time and their expertise and share their stories, kind of like we're doing here. Mm-hmm. Those are the people that I want to be the role models for our next generation. Right. And I know a lot of times there's, tall barbed wire fences, thanks again, 9/11, that keep it. I'm being somewhat sarcastic there, but it keeps the honest people out. It keeps that kid that I've had so many conversations with people. Yeah, I saw airplanes flying over and this and that, but they never made that next step. They never got to go to the airport and interact and realize, pilots were people like anyone else, right? We may have a love for aviation, but that next step, and that's what I think Young Eagles is so important and does so well, is gives people that first good look, and hopefully it's a good look. They don't get airsick. They have a great time. Yeah. And then they want to make that a bigger part of their life. Right. So I think it's so cool that you participate in that program.
Yeah. Well, it's done a lot for me, so it's only right to pay it forward.
Heck yeah. Okay, final question. What should I have asked you? What did I miss?
No, I think we covered a lot of good stuff. I think my biggest advice for younger folks that would listen to this is work hard and don't think that things are too far out of reach. The biggest things that I've done in my life have always been a challenge, but that's the point, is you work hard for that big reward. So work hard for what you want in life, and nothing will be out of reach. You can get to where you want to be with hard work and dedication and self-sacrifice. Sometimes you won't be able to go hang out with your friends at that party, or go on a cool trip for a weekend because you got a exam or a check ride coming up, but it's all worth it in the end.
Absolutely. That's a great way to end it. Tanner, thanks again so much, man.
Thanks, Antonio. Yeah.